It started as a joke. At least, that's what I thought when Mia leaned across the couch one rainy evening and said, "You'd actually look kind of cute if I dressed you up." She said it with a teasing smile, the kind that made me roll my eyes but also secretly wonder what she meant. We had been friends for years, close enough to say stupid things without thinking twice, and I never thought that sentence would change my life. But it did. More than I could ever imagine. At first, I laughed it off. I told her, "Yeah, right," as if that would ever happen, but she didn't drop it. Over the next few days, she kept bringing it up. She said it while we were studying, while we were hanging out at the cafe, even when she called me late at night just to tell me she'd found a perfect outfit for the experiment. I thought she was kidding, but there was something in her tone half playful, half serious that made me curious. I had no idea she was already planning something much bigger than I realized. It happened one weekend when her parents were out of town. She invited me over, saying she wanted help setting up a camera for her new project. She was into makeup tutorials, transformations, and short creative videos, so I thought nothing of it. When I got there, she had already set up lights in her room. I remember the smell of perfume in the air, soft music playing, and that mischievous grin on her face when she said, "Perfect timing. My model just arrived." I laughed, confused, until she held up a bag full of clothes and said, "It's time." I hesitated, of course. I told her I wasn't sure, that I didn't want to look ridiculous, but she just said, "Trust me. I know what I'm doing." I don't know why those words hit differently that day. Maybe it was because I really did trust her, or maybe I was tired of always being the predictable guy who never did anything unexpected. So, I said okay. The first few minutes were awkward. She handed me a soft shirt and told me to try it on. It was something I'd never wear, light, fitted, with delicate straps. I laughed nervously, but she kept encouraging me, saying, "Relax, no one's going to see. It's just us." She adjusted my hair, added a little foundation, and then mascara. Every touch of her brush, every soft correction, made me feel strangely calm. Then she showed me the mirror. For the first time, I didn't recognize the person looking back. It wasn't a boy. It wasn't even a version of me that I knew. It was someone new, someone soft, someone beautiful. Mia's eyes widened. She smiled but said nothing for a while, just walked around me, observing. Then she whispered, "I knew it." I asked what she meant, and she said, "I knew you'd look cute." I laughed again, trying to play it off, but my reflection distracted me. The more I looked, the less I saw the person I thought I was. The features that I'd never paid attention to suddenly looked different, as if they'd been waiting for this moment to exist. We spent hours that night trying different looks. Hairstyles, accessories, light lip gloss, even a skirt for a few photos. I should have felt embarrassed, but instead, I felt free. Like I'd stepped into a hidden version of myself that I didn't know existed. When I left her house that night, I kept thinking about it. The clothes, the mirror, the way she'd smiled. It was supposed to be a one-time joke, but something inside me changed. Over the next week, I couldn't focus on anything. I'd wake up thinking about that reflection, wondering who that person really was. It wasn't just about how I looked, it was about how I felt. I couldn't tell anyone, not even Mia, that a part of me missed that version. The version that didn't have to act tough or pretend to be someone I wasn't. Then one afternoon, she texted me again, "Round 2?" My heart skipped a beat. I didn't even hesitate before replying. "When?" She said, "Tomorrow." This time it was different. She said she wanted to do something more realistic, something that would really show transformation. She had planned everything: a wig, makeup palette, jewelry, even shoes. When I walked into her room, I could feel my heart racing. I tried to tell myself it was just another silly experiment, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. She started with my hair, pulling it back gently, placing the wig so naturally that it felt like it belonged. The makeup this time was more refined: eyeliner that made my eyes look larger, contouring that softened my jawline, foundation that blended perfectly. Then she helped me into a soft pastel dress that fit too well. I remember standing there, afraid to breathe, because every move made me more aware of what I was wearing. When I finally looked at myself again, it felt like time stopped. I didn't see him anymore. I didn't even remember how he looked. I saw her. A girl who looked nervous, shy, but alive. My throat went dry. Mia looked at me and said quietly, "You see it now, don't you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just nodded. She smiled, then whispered, "You're beautiful." That word echoed in my mind long after she said it. Beautiful. It was something I'd never been called before, something I didn't know I needed to hear. But hearing it from her made it real. We took a few photos that day, and she showed them to me. I didn't believe they were real. The person in the pictures had soft eyes, a gentle smile, and confidence that didn't look forced. It was like meeting someone I'd been searching for all along. I asked her to delete the photos later, but she didn't. She said, "You'll thank me one day." Weeks passed, and I tried to go back to normal, but I couldn't. Every time I looked in the mirror, I felt wrong. My clothes, my haircut, my voice, they all felt like costumes. I caught myself wondering what it would be like to live as that version again, to just exist without pretending. But I was scared. Scared of what people would think, scared of what it meant. Then one night, everything changed. Mia called me, her voice trembling. She said she needed help filming something important for a scholarship. When I got there, she handed me a box and said, "I need you to become her again." I froze. I told her I couldn't, that it had gone too far, but she looked desperate. "Please," she said. "It's for just one video." Against my better judgment, I agreed. This time, she went all out. Different lighting, better clothes, subtle jewelry, everything perfectly planned. I sat there silently as she transformed me again, layer by layer. The feeling came rushing back, the calm, the freedom, the strange sense of rightness. By the time she was done, I didn't even flinch seeing my reflection. It felt natural. But that night, after she posted the video privately, something unexpected happened. It blew up. She hadn't tagged me, of course, but people started commenting on how real and authentic it looked. They thought it was a genuine transformation video of a girl rediscovering herself. Thousands of views turned into hundreds of thousands. And all I could think was, that's me. That's who I really am. But I couldn't tell anyone. Not my family, not my friends, not even myself some days. I tried to bury it again, but it followed me. The more I tried to be him, the more it hurt. I started avoiding mirrors, hiding my face in hoodies, skipping social gatherings. I couldn't explain it to anyone because I didn't understand it fully myself. Mia noticed, of course. One evening she said softly, "You're not okay, are you?" I shook my head. "It's confusing," I whispered. "I don't know who I am anymore." She looked at me for a long moment, then said something that still rings in my head. "Maybe you're just finding out who you always were." I didn't respond, but inside, I knew she was right. Over the next few months, she became my anchor. She helped me explore quietly different clothes, different names, different ways of being myself without labels. We'd go shopping late at night or drive to distant towns where no one knew us. Every time I put on that side of me, I felt more alive. I laughed more. I talked differently without even meaning to. It wasn't an act anymore. But I also felt guilt. I'd lie to my parents about where I was going, lie to my friends about why I was distant. The secret was growing heavier, but I couldn't stop. I was addicted to being her. It wasn't about pretending, it was about breathing. Then came the moment I couldn't escape. One day at a cafe, a stranger recognized me from the video. She came up to me, smiling, and said, "You're that girl, right? The one from Mia's video?" I froze. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to deny it, but something in me couldn't. I just nodded slightly. The woman smiled and said, "You inspired me." "Thank you." She left, just like that. But I couldn't move. That night, I told Mia everything, how lost I felt, how terrified I was of never being able to go back. She held my hand and said, "You don't have to go back. You just have to be honest with yourself." I cried that night for the first time in years. Eventually, I did try to go back. I cut my hair short again, packed away the clothes, tried to act normal. But every time I did, it felt like erasing someone real. The voice in my head wouldn't stop whispering, this isn't you anymore. I realized I wasn't pretending to be her. I had been pretending to be him all along. One evening, standing in front of the mirror, I finally said it out loud, I can't be him again. The words came out shaky, but once they were spoken, I felt something shift. It wasn't guilt anymore. It was relief. Mia was the first person I told. She didn't say much, just hugged me tightly and said, I knew. We both laughed through tears. After that, things didn't magically become easy, but they became real. I started living more honestly, piece by piece. I told a few close people, faced judgment, confusion, even distance. But I also found acceptance, warmth, and a strange kind of peace. Sometimes I still look at those old photos, the ones Mia refused to delete. I see the person I used to be, and the person I became, and realize they were both me all along. The difference is, now I'm not afraid to admit which version feels like home. When people ask me how it all started, I smile and say, someone once told me I'd look cute. They laugh, not knowing that those simple words were the beginning of everything. Because the truth is, that one small joke became the moment my life truly began. And even though I can never be him again, I don't want to be. I've found myself in a reflection I once thought was impossible. And for the first time, when I look in the mirror, I don't see confusion. I see me. After that moment of clarity, life didn't suddenly become easy, but it became different. The first morning after I said those words to myself, I can't be him again, felt like waking up in someone else's body, but one that finally fit. The air in my room felt lighter somehow, as if I could finally breathe without pretending. But then reality caught up. Outside those four walls, the world didn't know what I'd realized. To everyone else, I was still him. The same voice, the same name, the same expectations. I stared at my phone, scrolling through messages from friends asking where I'd been, from my mom reminding me about family dinner, and I felt that familiar ache in my chest again, the one that came from living between two truths. When I went to meet Mia later that day, she greeted me like she always did, but there was something softer in her eyes. She asked how I felt, and all I could say was, strange. Like I've been living a lie that I didn't know was a lie until now. She smiled and said, that's what honesty feels like. At first it's uncomfortable. We sat there for hours, just talking. She told me that she'd known from that very first night that something had changed in me. It wasn't the makeup or the dress, she said. It was the way you looked at yourself, like you finally recognized who you were. I didn't know how to handle that. I wanted to be brave, to just live the way I felt inside, but I was terrified of what that would cost me. My family wasn't the kind to understand things that didn't fit neatly into what they believed. My dad, especially, had a very specific idea of who I was supposed to be. The thought of facing him made me sick. So, for weeks, I kept living two lives. During the day, I was his son, quiet, distant, trying not to give anything away. At night, with Mia or alone, I was myself, soft-spoken, gentle, finally at peace. But that double life couldn't last forever. The first crack came when my sister found a photo on Mia's page that hadn't been deleted properly. It wasn't obvious, but it was me, hairstyled, makeup perfect, a look that didn't belong to the boy they all knew. She confronted me about it one evening, holding her phone up and saying, "This looks like you, is it?" My throat closed. I didn't know what to say. The silence between us stretched until she finally whispered, "It is, isn't it?" I nodded slowly. Her expression softened, but she didn't understand. "Why?" she asked, as if it were something I could explain in a single word. I tried to tell her the truth, that I wasn't pretending, that it wasn't a phase or a joke anymore. She just stared at me for a long time and finally said, "You need to tell Mom and Dad." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept rehearsing how it would go, all the ways it could go wrong. Mia stayed up with me on call, telling me to breathe, to be honest, to be proud of who I was. She said, "You've already done the hardest part, accepting yourself. Everything else is just catching up." I wanted to believe her, but the fear was too heavy. When morning came, I finally did it. I told my parents. I didn't have a grand speech or the right words. I just said, "There's something I need to tell you. I'm not who you think I am anymore." My mom looked confused, my dad angry. When I tried to explain, my dad interrupted, saying, "Stop talking nonsense." My mom's eyes filled with tears. The air in the room felt heavy, almost suffocating. Every word I said after that only made it worse. They didn't yell, but the silence was louder than any scream could have been. When I left the room, I knew nothing would be the same again. 4 days, I didn't go home. I stayed at Mia's place, barely eating, just trying to process everything. She didn't try to fix it, she just stayed beside me. One night, she said something that stuck with me forever. Sometimes people don't reject you because they hate you. They reject you because your truth forces them to question their own. That hit harder than anything. I realized I couldn't live waiting for everyone else to catch up to my truth. So I started small. I began going out as myself, quietly, in places where no one knew me. I'd put on simple clothes that made me feel right, not too flashy, not too hidden. Every time I did, I felt a mix of fear and freedom. The first time someone called me miss without hesitation, I nearly cried. It wasn't about being seen as something else, it was about finally being seen, period. Of course, not everything was easy. There were stares, whispers, even laughter sometimes. But there were also moments of kindness, a cashier who smiled genuinely, a stranger who complimented my hair, a child who waved without judgment. Those tiny moments built me back up piece by piece. Months passed. My family still struggled, but things began to soften slowly. My mom started calling occasionally, asking if I was okay. My dad didn't talk much, but at least he didn't hang up anymore. My sister became my quiet ally, sending me little texts like, "Mom asked about you again," or "Dad saw your photo but didn't say anything." It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was something. Meanwhile, Mia kept pushing me forward. She helped me find small gigs doing makeup videos and short social campaigns about identity and confidence. One of those videos, ironically, went viral again. This time, I didn't hide. When people commented saying they related, saying my courage helped them, I felt something I'd never felt before: purpose. It wasn't about transformation anymore. It was about telling the truth through it. One day, out of nowhere, my dad showed up at Mia's place. He stood at the door, awkward, unsure. I didn't know what to say. He looked older than I remembered, tired maybe. After a long silence, he said, "I don't understand all of this. But I saw that video. You looked happy. I haven't seen that in a long time." I didn't know whether to cry or run, but then he added quietly, "I still see my child in you. That's what matters." That was the first time in months I let him hug me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a full acceptance. But it was a start. As time passed, I began to live openly. I stopped hiding from mirrors. I started introducing myself the way I wanted to be known. Some people drifted away, some grew closer, and some I hadn't even met yet found me and said they saw themselves in my story. Every time that happened, I thought about that first night, how a simple sentence from a friend had changed everything. She said I'd look cute. That's all it took. A few words that opened a door I didn't even know existed. I used to think that losing him meant losing everything I'd built, but now I realize I didn't lose anything. I just shed what wasn't mine. I found strength in vulnerability, courage in confusion, and truth in transformation. Sometimes, I still look through old photos me before all this and I don't feel disgust or regret. I feel gratitude. Because that person carried me until I was strong enough to become who I really am. Mia once asked me if I missed being him. I thought for a while before answering. No, I said. Because I never really was him. I was just waiting for her to wake up. Now, every day feels like a continuation of that awakening. Some days are hard. Some days I still doubt myself. But every time I walk past a mirror and catch my reflection, I smile. Because I see me, not a version I created, not a mask I wear, but the person I was always meant to be. And maybe that's what transformation really is. Not changing who you are, but becoming who you've always been, quietly, bravely, one reflection at a time. The following spring brought a quiet kind of peace, the kind that didn't come all at once but built slowly like sunlight after a storm. The air felt lighter, the world less suffocating. I had finally stopped fighting with myself. Every morning, I'd wake up and feel that small spark of recognition when I looked in the mirror, a reminder that the person staring back was finally real. I had changed my name officially by then. It wasn't dramatic, it was just paperwork, but the moment I saw it printed on my ID, my hands shook. For the first time in my life, a government document felt like it belonged to me. Mia was there with me that day. She took a photo of me holding my ID, smiling so wide it almost hurt. "That's her," she said softly. "That's you." Still, it wasn't all perfect. The world doesn't magically become kind because you find yourself. I had to rebuild everything: my relationships, my job, even how I walked through the world. People stared. Some whispered. Others avoided me entirely. But there were moments of quiet kindness that kept me going. The old lady at the corner shop who started calling me sweetheart. The coworker who used my new name without hesitation. The stranger on the bus who smiled and said, "Love your earrings." Those small things were my victories. Mia was my constant. She kept pushing me to live, not just survive. She told me to apply for a small internship at a local creative studio. I hesitated, terrified of rejection, but she said, "You've already rebuilt yourself once. What's another try?" I went, and to my surprise, they didn't care about who I used to be. They cared about what I could do. They loved my ideas, my creativity, my story. For the first time, I felt seen for what I brought to the table, not what I looked like. Over the next months, I started creating again: stories, videos, designs, things that told pieces of my truth without saying it outright. I used to think people wouldn't care, but they did. They saw authenticity, and it resonated. I met others who had gone through similar journeys. Some had lost everything in the process, others were still hiding. We shared silent nods of understanding when words felt too heavy. But then something unexpected happened. Mia got a job offer abroad. It was her dream, something she'd worked toward for years. When she told me, I smiled and said I was proud of her, but that night, I cried. Not because I didn't want her to go, but because I realized how much I'd leaned on her. She had been there from the first day, through every tear, every doubt, every step of becoming me. I didn't know how to exist without her by my side. Before she left, we spent one last evening together on her apartment rooftop. The city lights shimmered below us, and there was a soft chill in the air. She handed me a small box. Inside was a silver pendant with 2 initials, hers and mine. "For when you forget how strong you are," she said. I couldn't speak. I just hugged her and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me before I saw myself." She laughed through tears and said, "You did the hard part." I just held the mirror. When she left, I felt empty for a while. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't that uncertain person anymore, lost between versions of myself. I had become my own mirror. I started journaling again. Every night, I'd write about the day, not just what happened, but how I felt. One night I wrote, "She said I'd look cute." She was right. But she didn't know she'd uncover someone who couldn't go back. That line became the title of a short story I published online. I didn't expect much, but people started sharing it. The comments poured in: strangers saying they cried, that they felt seen, that they were finally ready to accept themselves too. Some said they'd been afraid for years but that my story gave them courage. I read every comment with tears in my eyes. It hit me that the thing that once felt like a burden was now helping others heal. My parents eventually came around too, slowly, hesitantly. My mom was the first to visit. She stood in the doorway, nervous, clutching a bag of food like it was a peace offering. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled and said, "Hi." She stepped forward and hugged me. It wasn't long or perfect, but it was real. "Over dinner," she said softly, "I may never understand everything, but I want to try." I'll never forget that. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was love trying to find its way through confusion. That was enough. My dad took longer. He didn't talk about it, didn't ask questions, but one day he sent me a text. It was simple: "Saw your new video. You've grown strong. Proud of you." I stared at it for a long time before I started crying. Sometimes love shows up quietly, like that. As time went on, I began to see my journey not as something tragic but as something powerful. The fear, the shame, the tears, they all built me. They stripped away everything false until only the truth remained. People sometimes ask me now if I regret it, if I wish I could have stayed the person I was before. I tell them, he was never me. He was the shadow that protected me until I was ready to step into the light. One evening, I was invited to speak at a small community event about self-expression. I almost said no, but something told me to go. When I stood on stage, looking at the faces in the crowd, some young, some old, some just beginning their own journeys, I felt that same nervous flutter I had felt the first time I saw my reflection in me as mirror. I took a deep breath and told them my story. Not the polished version, not the viral video, but the real, raw truth. I told them how terrifying it was to let go of who you're told to be, and how beautiful it is to finally meet the person hiding underneath. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment before applause filled it. Afterward, people came up to me crying, hugging me, thanking me. One girl whispered, "You made me feel less alone." That night, I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore, it belonged to everyone who had ever looked in the mirror and wondered who they were supposed to be. Years later, Mia came back to visit. We met at the same cafe where she had once teased me about looking cute. Time had changed us both, but the bond was the same. She looked at me and said, "You've become everything I knew you could be." I laughed and told her, "You created a monster." She shook her head. "No," she said softly. "You created yourself." Now, when I think back to that night in her room, when it all began, I realize how small moments can change entire lives. A laugh. A dare. A simple sentence that unravels everything you thought you knew. She said I'd look cute. I did. But more importantly, I found beauty in a version of myself that had been waiting, quietly, patiently, for years. If I could go back and tell that old version of me anything, I'd say this: you don't have to be afraid of losing him. You're not losing anyone. You're finally meeting you. And even now, on the hardest days, when the world feels heavy and uncertain, I look at my reflection and whisper those same words I said long ago softly, almost like a promise: I can't be him again. Because he was never the real me. She is. The seasons changed again, and so did I. But this time, the changes weren't about looks or names, they were quiet, internal, the kind that settle deep in your bones and reshape how you see the world. I had learned to live as myself without asking for permission. The mornings felt different now. I'd make coffee, stand by the window watching the sunrise, and instead of that old ache of confusion, I felt something gentler, a sense of belonging I'd never had before. It wasn't perfect. Some days I still questioned everything, some days I felt the weight of memories of who I used to be, but most days I could finally breathe. Work kept me busy. I started creating short documentaries about people who had faced similar journeys, finding themselves, losing everything, and still finding a way to keep going. It was my way of giving back, of saying thank you to the universe for not letting me collapse when I easily could have. Those stories weren't glamorous or dramatic, they were raw, honest, and human. Every time I interviewed someone, I saw a piece of myself in their eyes, the same fear, the same hope. One day, after finishing a shoot, I got a call from my mom. Her voice sounded different, lighter somehow. She said, "Your father and I were watching one of your videos." He didn't say much, but when it ended, he said, "She's doing good." My breath caught. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd ever expected. Acceptance doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, hidden inside small sentences. A few weeks later, I visited home for the first time in months. The same old house, the same scent of my mother's cooking, the same creak in the wooden steps. But I was different, and somehow, the house felt smaller, like it belonged to another life. My father was in the living room reading. He looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I saw hesitation in his eyes, but also something softer. He gestured for me to sit. We talked, awkwardly at first, about small things: the weather, my work, his plants. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "You seem happier." That one sentence was everything I'd been waiting to hear. It wasn't approval or an apology, it was acknowledgement. The kind that says, "I see you." I nodded, unable to speak, and for the first time, We sat together without the old tension between us. It felt fragile, like glass, but it was real. After that visit, something shifted in me. I stopped feeling like I was hiding from my past. Instead, I began to see it as part of my story, part of what made me strong enough to survive. I started speaking at small schools and art festivals about identity, courage, and the quiet power of truth. I never used to think of myself as brave, but every time I stood on a stage and saw someone's eyes light up with recognition, I realized bravery isn't about being fearless, it's about being honest in a world that rewards masks. Mia and I kept in touch constantly, even from across the ocean. Sometimes she'd send me voice notes in the middle of the night saying things like, "Remember when you said you couldn't be him again? I think that's the moment your real story began." Other times, she'd send photos of sunsets from her new city, and I'd reply with mine, as if we were still sharing the same sky. Years passed quietly, and one day she came back. We hadn't seen each other in person since that night on her rooftop. She looked older, wiser, and when she saw me, she smiled with that same familiar warmth. "Look at you," she said. "You glow differently now." I laughed. "It's peace," I told her. "Turns out it looks good on me." We spent hours catching up, walking through the city like old times. At one point, she stopped in front of a store window, looking at our reflections. "Do you remember?" she asked. I nodded immediately. That reflection, the one that started it all. "You were terrified," she said. "I was," I admitted. "But you believed in me when I couldn't." She shook her head. "No. You just needed someone to hand you the key. You were always meant to open that door." That night, when I got home, I found the old pendant she'd given me years ago. The one with our initials. I hadn't worn it in ages, but when I held it in my hands, it still carried that same weight, that same meaning. It reminded me that sometimes love isn't romantic or dramatic, it's simply someone believing you deserve to exist as yourself. A few months later, I got invited to participate in a national storytelling event. It was televised, huge, something I never thought I'd do. The theme was becoming. I almost said no again, but something inside me whispered that it was time. When I stepped onto that stage, the lights were bright, the audience silent, and my heart pounded in my chest. I told my story from the beginning, the joke, the transformation, the reflection that changed everything. I didn't hold back. I talked about the fear, the rejection, the confusion, and then the quiet courage that slowly replaced it. By the time I finished, the audience was completely still. Then, one by one, they began to clap. Some stood, some wiped tears, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't just telling my story, I was telling ours. Every person who had ever hidden, doubted, or silenced a part of themselves was part of it. After the show, people came up to me, strangers from all walks of life, students, parents, even older folks. One man said, "My daughter's been afraid to come out to us. After hearing you, I think I understand now." Another whispered, "You made me feel seen." I smiled through tears because that's what I had always wanted, to make someone else feel what Mia had made me feel that night in her room. Seen, understood, real. A few days later, I received a letter. It was from a young person who had watched the event. It said, "I was planning to end everything this week. Then I saw you. And now I think maybe I can keep going." I sat there holding that letter, crying silently, realizing that all the pain, all the confusion, all the years of struggle had somehow turned into hope for someone else. That night, I went for a walk. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, and I caught my reflection in a shop window, older now, calmer, but still carrying that same spark. I smiled at it, thinking how far I'd come. She said I'd look cute. Those 5 words had started as a playful tease, but they became the sentence that rewrote my entire life. I used to think I couldn't be him again because something had broken, but now I know it's because I'd finally healed. I'd outgrown that shell, and there was no going back. Sometimes, people ask if I'd change anything. If I'd erase the confusion, the fear, the heartbreak. I always tell them no. Because without those moments, I wouldn't have found the strength to become who I am now. The journey wasn't about escaping him, it was about discovering her. And she's everything I was meant to be. Now, when I tell my story, I don't end it with sorrow or regret. I end it with gratitude. Gratitude for Mia, for every small act of kindness, for every reflection that showed me a different side of myself, and even for the pain that shaped me. And every time I pass a mirror, I whisper softly, not out of guilt or doubt, but as a promise, I can't be him again. Because this time, I'm finally me.